Alright, hi guys and welcome back. I know it's been a while since the last tutorial, but I've been quite busy over the course of the last few months. But nevertheless, here we are again with, of course, another very exciting Android video tutorial. I am still your host, Matthias Reich, and today we'll take a second look at intents. Now, so far we created applications that had only one activity, which is not very common for a real application. So today I want to show you how to incorporate a second activity into your application. Now, as you will know, each activity has to have its own layout, and so if we have a second activity, we also need a second layout. So for the sake of time, I've already pre-created those two layouts and I'd like to show you right now. So here it is. It's really nothing fancy here. It's just a bunch of text views and a button at the bottom. So let me actually show you the graphical layout of this. As you can see, there is a text view up here that says your most favorite color is. Then we have three separate text views which say red, green, and blue, and a button that says pick your favorite color. Now, when we later click on that button, we actually want to bring up our second activity, which is this one here. It's called Picker. And this layout actually has a text view. Again, it's just a label, and then a radio group with three radio buttons. And let me again show you the graphical layout. So you have those three radio buttons here, and each one just corresponds to a favorite color of yours, hopefully. So the first one says I like red, the second one I enjoy green, and the third one is I love blue. Now if you click on one of those radio buttons, you will later on be taken back to that first activity here, and then depending on which radio button you clicked on, the according text view here is highlighted in the appropriate color. So for example, if you click on I like red, you'll be taken back here, and then that text view up here, red, will display in the color red. Now, another thing that is new in these layouts here is, thanks to a recent API release of Android, you are now able to specify your click handlers directly in that layout, and you do that with the onClick property down here. And what you want to do is you want to just specify the name of a method you want to handle the clicks with. So in this case, I just named that button click handler. And also in the picker XML, I assigned the same click handler to each radio button, and I called it radio click handler. Now I will show you how to implement that method and how to use it in just a second. And also I have already pre-created those strings in here, so all those labels and stuff and all those text views and radio button labels are already here in that strings XML file. So what I'd like to show you first before we actually start coding is how to add a second layout to your application. And to do that, you will want to come over here to that layout folder and just right click and then choose New, Other. Right, and then you'll be given that little dialog here. And now it's important that you actually create an Android XML file. Right, so you can also create an XML file down here, but that won't work because that's a generic XML file for general purposes, I think. And you won't be able to create a layout by using these types of XML files. So just make sure that you're actually creating an Android XML file, then click Next. Then you name that file, just for the sake of this, let me call it test layout, and you want to specify which type of resource you want to create. And since we want to create a layout, you make sure that you have checked that radio button here. And down here, you can actually specify the root element of that new XML file. And since we're creating a layout, we'll be fine with linear layout. And let me just pull that up a bit. And oh, I forgot. You have to add .xml to that file name here. All right, and then just click Finish. And as you can see here, this is our new test layout XML, and it has that linear layout as a root element. And now you can start creating that layout for your activity. Well, since I've already done that, let me just delete that. We don't need it. All right, so let's go to our episode 11.java file and actually start coding. Now, the first thing I want to create is actually a static variable, which is used later on when we call our intent. So just come down here right after that class definition and type static final private int, and I'll name that choose color, and I assign it a value of 0. Right, so this will come in handy later on. All right, next I want to create a helper function that will come in handy when we work with our color labels, and that helper function actually resets all the colors of all labels to that neutral gray. And we're just creating a method for it, and that method will be called reset colors. All right, so first we want to create a local variable of the type text view and call that TV. Now we have to import that text view class, so just move your cursor to that text view and hold Control Shift and M. And next we want to assign each label to that variable and then set the color property of that assigned label. So we type TV is equal to, cast that to a text view, find view by ID, r.id dot, and then it is label red. And then to set the text color, we use the set text color method, and we use our helper function parse color of that color class, and we pass a value of 66, 66, and 66, which is a neutral dark gray. All right, so now let me simply copy those two lines here and paste them in 2 times, and then we change that to label green, and we change that to label blue. All right, so next we want to implement that button click listener, as you might recall. Let me show you. Down here in that layout file, we set that on click property for our button to call the method button click handler, and so we have to create that method now. So let's get out of this method here, and you want to type public void button click handler. And this method expects one parameter, and it's of the type view, and I just called it target. All right, so let me first import that class here. So in this method, we actually want to set up our intent object and then call our second activity. Now, before we set up our intent and call our activity, let's actually create that second class for our activity. So what you want to do is you want to come over here under your package name and right click, then go to new, and then choose class. All right, and Next, you want to give a name to that class. I call that color picker. And then you want to come here to that browse button, click it, and up here you want to type activity. And this gives you a list of all classes that are available that start with activity or have the activity name in them. So you want to select the first one here, activity Android app, and click OK. And then you can click finish. And as you can see, now we have a second Java class here, and it automatically opens. So for now, we leave it at that, and we come back to our episode 11.java file, and we start to fill our button click handler with some fancy code. So the first thing I want to create is our intent object. Now let me actually make a bit more room here. And that intent object, let's import that class. I want to call question, and that is equal to new intent, open parentheses. And now if you press Control and space, you can see a list of all the available constructors for that intent object. And we're actually interested in, let me see, this constructor here. So it expects actually a context, which we can pass on as this, and then a class we want to call. And that class we want to call is actually our color picker.java file. So in order to access that, we can simply put in our package name, which is com.xtensivearts.episode.11 in my case, dot, and then we choose color picker, and then dot class, and that returns the class instance of that color picker class. So come down to the next line. Now, last time we created an intent object in episode number 10. We created that object, we set an action and the data for that activity, and then we started the activity. Today, we actually want to receive a result back from our color picker activity, and that is the color the user likes best. So in this tutorial, we're not going to use the start activity method, but rather we want to use the start activity for result method. And that expects an intent, and we pass in our intent object, which is called question. And the request code is our choose color, which we, as you might remember, defined up here, right? And believe it or not, but that is all we have to do to call our second activity. So now let's get over to our color picker class and fill it with some nice code. So the first thing you want to do is you want to implement that onCreate method. So just go after that class definition, type onCreate, hold down Control and space, and then just choose the first method, first item there, and that will actually automatically implement that that onCreate method and fill it with some code. So what we have to add here after super.onCreate is we have to assign our second layout, that picker.xml, to this activity, and we do that with set content view, and it expects the ID of that layout. So we type r.layout.picker. All right, and so now this activity uses our second layout here. We only have to implement one extra method, and that is our radio click handler that, as you might recall, we defined in our layout file. You can see here on click radio click handler for all 3 radio buttons. So let's do this now. So type public void radio click handler. It expects one parameter view. I call that v. Right, and don't forget to import that class. And now we're good to go. Now again, first we want to create a new intent object, and this time I call it answer, and that is a new intent, and we'll leave it with a default constructor. Now an intent object can be both a question and an answer. It's actually a container for data that you pass on between activities, right? And now we want to determine which radio button the user clicked on, and since that radio click handler method we are in right now is used by all of those 3 radio buttons, we'll do that with a switch statement. So type switch, open parentheses, v, which is our parameter up there, and that determines the radio button, or really the content element the user clicked on. And then we use that get ID method, right? And so first, if that ID is r dot ID dot radio read. So now we want to fill in that answer intent object with all the data we need in our first activity when the user clicked on the red radio button. And in order to do that, we'll use the put extra method of that intent object. And as you can see, there are a bunch of different methods you can use. They pretty much expect a string as a first parameter, and that is really the name of the property you want to set. And the second parameter is just the type of data you want to set. And since we want to pass on a color code, we actually want to use 2 strings down here, right? So we'll use that one, and we call that property color. And the value is actually the color red, or the color code for red. And the second thing we want to send back to our first activity is the ID of the label we want to colorize. So again, we use that put extra method, but this time we want to send back an int value. So we use this version of that method, and we call that property label, and the value is actually r dot ID dot label red. All right, and then we just end that case block by inserting a break statement. Okay, so now let me copy that and paste it in 2 times, and then I want to change that to green. Change the color here to green, and change that one here to green as well. And then down here I want to change that to radio blue. I'm sorry, of course up here it should not be label green, but it should be radio green. And then the code for blue is 0000FF, and the label we want to colorize is of course label blue. Okay, so now we have a switch statement and we set all our data, and now we actually have to tell our activity that the data we have been specified in that answer intent object is actually our result data, and we do that by using the set result method, and the result code is result OK, and the data is our answer object. All right, and the last thing we need to do here is call finish to tell our activity that it's done. All right, so now we can save that file here and go back to our first class file, because now we actually we have called our second activity, our color picker activity, and the user clicked on some radio button, and now we receive data, and now we need to create a method to check which data we got back from that other activity. So in order to do that, we have to implement, or rather override, the onActivityResult method. So type onActivity, hit control space, and then you see onActivityResult, and then just hit enter, and it automatically implements that method. Now you can get rid of that code up here, so that leaves you with an empty method, and we're ready to go. Now, first you have to determine which activity sent back data to this activity, and you do that by checking the request code parameter here. As you will remember, we specified that request code up here when we called our start activity for result method, and we set it to choose color. Now, since you can only have one activity result method, you have to determine which activity you called, because you can call several activities, which activity actually sent back data, and which data of which activity you want to evaluate. So we do that by adding a switch statement, and we want to check the request code, and in case it is color, it is choose color, we want to go ahead and implement our code to evaluate which radio button the user clicked on. But we only want to do that if the result code of that activity is result OK. So we have to check for that. If result code is equal to result OK, then we're good to go. Alright, the first thing we want to do is we want to use our helper method and reset all the colors. So now all colors will be neutral gray. Okay, so next I want to get all the data we received from our second activity and store them into some variables here. Now we essentially have two types of data. We have the color code, and we have the ID of that label we want to colorize. So let's start with the color. Create a new string variable, call it color, and that is equal to data. And now there's a method called getExtras, and you will write that down, then dot, and then you have some methods that return the different types of variables. So you can, get a string, get a boolean, get a byte, and so on. So since our color code is a string, we actually want to get a string. All right, and the name of that property we stored back in our second activity is color. All right, and so this stores the color code in our variable color. Now the second thing is our ID of our label we want to colorize, and so I'll create another variable of type int and call it label. And that is equal to data dot getExtras dot getInt, and the key to that is called label. Alright, so now we're actually ready to colorize our label, and to do that we want to create a new variable of type textView, that is equal to text view, find view by ID. And now instead of passing in r dot id dot something, we just pass in our label variable. And then we can colorize that label by using the set text color method, and use that helper function of that color class, parse color. And now instead of hard coding that, like, FF000, something like that, we just pass in our color variable. All right. And that's all there is to do for colorizing that label. Now don't forget to add that break statement down here. And it's also good to add a default label and just have it break. All right, so now let's test our application and see if it works. So here we are in our Android emulator, and as you can see, works perfectly. You can see here's our label and our big labels, and down here is our button. And now if we click that button, oops, you can see there's an error. And I showed you this intentionally because we forgot something very important. And let me show you what that is. Well, we created our second class here with our second activity. And in our first class, we started that activity and everything. And that's fine, but we forgot to tell Android that there actually is a second activity. And you have to do that, otherwise that activity cannot be used, cannot be started, anything, and it will produce an error, as you saw just a couple of seconds ago. So in order to register our new activity with Android, we have to edit our Android manifest XML file. So you will want to come over here, double click, and then you get this big scary window. And don't bother with it, and I won't go into too much detail right now because we're covering that Android manifest file in some other tutorial, because there are a bunch of things you can do with that file. But for now, just come down here and come to that Android manifest.xml tab, click it, and as you can see, it's just basically a regular XML file, and it sort of defines our applications, which activities are present in that application, and so on. And as you can see here, under that application section, we have our first activity, that is episode 11. But we're missing out our second activity, which would be color picker. So we have to add that. So what you want to do is you want to come down after that closing activity tag here and actually open up another activity tag. Then you just basically copy the information from that first one here. So the first property we have to set is the name of that activity. So we type Android name is equal to, okay, so the name of our class for our activity is color picker. But please make sure that you precede that name with a dot. All right. And the next property I want to add is a label, and that label is just basically the name of that activity, and I predefined that in that strings XML, and it's called second activity underscore name, and then we can close that off. All right, so let me tidy things up a bit, and then you can save that file. And let me just show you in a strings XML Here's actually that string second activity name, and I called that activity colon color picker, right? All right, save that manifest file and then you can close it. And now let's run our application again. All right, here we are back in our emulator with our updated version of our little application. You can see the main screen still shows up, but now if I click on that pick your favorite color button, you can see our second activity is actually started, and now I can choose my favorite color. And if I click, I enjoy green, I'm taken back to that first activity, and then that label in the middle, green, is highlighted in green. And then I can, click that button again and maybe choose I love blue, and then that stuff is in blue, that label here. And I can click again, I like red, and then the label is red. I think you get the idea. So this is a very simple and quick example of an application that consists of more than one activity. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If so, please feel free to comment on the blog. And if you have any questions regarding this tutorial, please feel free to ask them. You can find the project files for this tutorial, of course, at www.xtensivearts.com. And if you have any friends who enjoy Android programming, please tell them about the site. I'm always happy if new visitors come to that site and leave comments and such. And yeah, the next tutorial will probably be dealing with databases, something like an introduction to databases. And until then, I hope you all learned something, and I wish you happy coding. My name is Matthias Reich, and I'll see you next time.